Good evening, and thank you, my fellow sisters, for indulging us, as Onica said, to discuss a topic that is is topical at the moment, or it has been topical for a while, since 2018, and I'll tell you why I say so. Um, and I'm quite humbled by the fact that you agreed to do this, because most times, if you are not active yourself in a particular subject matter, you then do not participate, or you don't act, because you are not interested in what is being said or being done. So thank you for agreeing to do this, and hopefully most of you will be the ambassadors and champions when you are called upon to agitate, to advocate, to make yourself available on some of these issues that you are dealing with. It's a big issue for this country, and I read an article of someone who said South Africa might not be a viable society, meaning that it has to be replaced. So this society must be replaced in the manner in which it deals with women and children. And it hit me when I read that article, that are we a viable society in the manner in which we conduct our affairs, and even how we treat women and children, right? And as I start, I want you to indulge me and understand where I'm coming from. And I think I speak for most of you, if not just hear what I'm saying, because we've all sought our voices to be heard, and we seek our voices to be heard both at an individual level and at a collective level, at a personal level and at a political level, right? And one has been able to reflect the intersection of my unique biography of who I am with the larger meaning of my historical time. So all of us in the 40, I'm 55 this year, all that has informed how I see society, how I embrace, how I interact and interject where necessary, right? And I think it's for most of us. And one thing that I have realized, that most of the time, and especially when we deal with issues of gender discrimination, inequalities, gender-based violence, we're being instructed to inform or frame our language or ideas in the familiar or comfortable voice of a dominant group, right? You will see it, and you have seen it over the many years, and now that, and most times when you say the things that we wish to say, the dominant group is not happy with how we're framing our voices and the ideas that we present. So it makes them uncomfortable, and it's something that we live with, and we are not scared to push back ourselves, right? And we're going to deal with some of the examples that have come out in social media. In particular, the WhatsApp group that was doing the rounds on Tshegofatso, and what role the so-called fiance or wife of the boyfriend has played or not played, right? So that is one of the examples that I like us to deal with, right? Because I know a lot of people struggled with it for a long time, and others are still struggling with it. So let's go through how we found ourselves in 2020 still fighting for the voice of women to be heard, and be heard louder than before. All of you, without a doubt, have been active in your respective fields and areas. You all been active in politics. You understand violence against women. You know it. You know how it manifests itself. Some of us have been victims of violence, and I think we can, without a doubt, all of us say we have been victims of violence, right? Whether it has been someone trying to grab your breast, touching your butt, trying to force you to kiss him, or others have been raped, others have been physically beaten up, others have been emotionally scarred from the relationships that they have with those that they thought they were in a partnership with. So we have all been victims of violence, right? It varies with all of us. But the truth of the matter is it exists and is pervasive in this country. We get asked the question, why gender-based violence? Why don't you just deal with violence against women, right? And maybe for a minute, let's talk about why is it that we call it GBV? Because if it affects women disproportionately to men, why don't we just deal with it as violence against women and girls instead of talking about GBV, right? The truth of the matter is that the violence against women and girls is predominant and is pervasive, but it also happens to men and boys, right? You can't run away from it. It happens, right? But our violence and the cause of this violence is found in the gender-based inequalities and discrimination that exist, right? We'll talk about the structural drivers of this violence that we see in this country. So in 2018, many women said, this can't go on. Many deaths, many rapes of women and children were happening at an alarming rate in 2018. A group of women decided that something has to be done. And the decision was that there has to be a shutdown of a country where women on that day will ground the country to a standstill. All these women did not know each other when they first met and decided that they're going to do this. Onica, who's on the line, was one of those, and she was operating from Cape Town. We all responded to this Facebook message that was posted to say something has to be done, and what is that? And the decision was that there's going to be a protest action march to the union building, and in fact to the state. And that's why you had all these marches taking place in the entire country, with particular focus on Cape Town, Bloemfontein, and Pretoria, representing what we call the state, the legislature, executive, and the judiciary, right? This whole march and its planning and the logistics was done on social media through WhatsApp, Facebook, and Telegram. That's how it was organized. We pulled that march together, but we didn't pull it just because we wanted to march. There was systematic madness in it, that because we wanted to do things differently for a change, right? We had been doing things the same way for the last 20 years or so, and we realized that things are not changing. What has to be different, right? So you this time you can't be civil to the state. You have to demand answers differently. So it forced us to do our own work and do the research and put together a memorandum of demands, right? And we had the 24 demands that were presented to government. And it's important for me to give you this history because it tells you where we are today. And at that march on that day, Cape Town happened, it was successful. Bloemfontein happened, it was successful. The small provinces happened, it was successful. Pretoria was the center in the sense that that's where we actually wanted the president to receive the memo. And we had made it very clear that we don't want any other cabinet member to receive the memo other than the president. And sometimes our government takes us lightly and think that we are joking. We meant it. So when Minister Pando was sent to receive the memo, she was told nicely to go back because that's not what was the decision of the protest march. The protest march wanted the president to receive this memo. It led to president only arriving at night, 9 o'clock at night, to receive that memo because we stayed at the Union building. We were not going to leave until he received that memo. There was a reason for us doing that because we understood that unless he appreciated the urgency of what we were dealing with, we're just not going to get anywhere. And I think he got to understand that night when he found still a number of women outside the UN building waiting for him, right? And I must say, a day or two later, we were then called to the office of the president, led by Olive Chisane, just to plan for what was one of the demands in the 24 demands, one of being that there must be a summit, a gender-based violence summit and femicide summit, which took place in November 2018.
Yes.
Right? And let me say this also. Civil society played an incredible role in pulling that together, right? Even in terms of content, right? And I think because of the drive of civil society, government was forced to match that energy and passion, right? They never not double up, but they were forced to read, to respond as quickly as they could. So we had a successful summit, and some of you watched it on national TV. And out of that summit came a presidential declaration that was signed between government and civil society, which led to the final document that you have before you, which is the NSP, right? For the longest of time, civil society had been agitating for that national strategic plan to be in place so that we all as South Africans understand what is the roadmap in ending gender-based violence, right? If we took the same approach with HIV/AIDS, where we had a strategic plan on HIV and AIDS, why couldn't we do the same with gender-based violence? And that was the approach, that you marshaled all the resources towards HIV and AIDS. It was a pandemic. Gender-based violence is the same and treated the same way, right? And you had a team of government and civil society working together to put that document in place. And Onica, if you can just take us, let me go through the slides so that I can be structured. I can talk from the heart any given time, but I must respect this audience.
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, I've been projecting all along. That's strange.
Hello, Lebo.
Okay. Just a slight technical. There we go.
So let me continue. So out of that summit, you had close to 8 working streams. You had a working stream on prevention. You had a working stream on care and support, on law and policy, research and data management, accountability and leadership, economic power. In fact, we changed it from economic empowerment to economic power, just for the hell of it, just because we had to use masculine language for a change, right? And we understood that.
Okay.
Lebo, mute your mic.
Okay.
Lebo, mute your mic.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. All right. Okay. All right. I'll come back.
So let's go to that theory of change document.
Okay.
Okay. So where was I? So I was disturbed by labor a bit.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. So as I said, you had those working streams, and out of those working streams, there were resolutions and recommendations that informed the National Strategic Plan, right? And the slide that is on display now is what is in that document and what informed that document. We looked at how do we change the narrative around GBV in this country, and stop making it a women's problem, right? And we realized, we agreed, all of us, that it's a crisis that affects all South Africans, not women, right? So it requires almost all of us to respond, right? We all have to address the structural drivers of GBV, right? Paramount is to stop the violence before it happens. And we'll touch on that, right? And in the process, enforce the laws and policies that are in place, right? Where you have a victim, be able to respond adequately, right? And ensure that there is adequate resourcing. Because for a long time, and I think Pumi is fully aware of this, the Department of Women today, its budget is not even more than 200 million, right? Of that money that they have, the bulk of it goes to the Gender Commission, right? So the Ministry of Women is it's supposed to exercise oversight on all the government departments and monitor progress in women's or gender equality, right? But they don't have the requisite resources to do so. But we have a ministry. So unless you give this NSP the necessary resources, it will be a document that is sitting in a shelf somewhere and not be implemented. And that's why we pushed and made sure that the costing of the NSP happens, right? But then elevate accountability, because we haven't held those who are given the powers to account on anything most of the time, and especially when it comes to GBV, right? So we are quite clear that this, all of us have to sign on to this, right? So as the NSP was adopted and approved by cabinet, they understood that this is what needs to happen, right? And it's a multi-sectoral approach that we're taking with the NSP, right? It's every corner, every institution, every individual has to put an effort in changing for South Africa for the better, right? And ending the violence meted against women and girls, right? Let's move on, Onica. So just to amplify what I'm saying, right? In that document, when you read it, you realize that we're able to identify the structural drivers and how you address those drivers to stop the violence, right? How do you meet the needs of the survivors and the community? And how do you strengthen and collaborate and to improve systems, especially information and resourcing? At the moment, for an example, if a woman applies for a protection order in Johannesburg today, and for some reason she has to leave and go to Mpumalanga, and the perpetrator follows her to Mpumalanga, that protection order will not be used. The police in Mpumalanga can't even retrieve it because the systems are not talking to each other, right? The dockets disappear all the time in cases of abuse. There is no system that exists to ensure that that data is kept safe, right? So let me move away from the vision. I think we have dealt with that, right? I've spoken to the principles really that drives the NSP. It's multi-sectoral, it's coordinated, there's accountability, it's human rights based, it's survivor focused, feminist driven. And when we say feminist, people raise up their hands and think we are talking, it's a swear language or it's an insult. No, feminism is about equality. If you believe in the equality of the sexes, you are a feminist, right? And I want you to be comfortable to say so, because really it's about espousing values of equality, and that's all, right? We want to be inclusive, we want to be intersectional. And let me quickly deal with this intersectionality, because intersectionality was a big issue. You needed to ensure that you bring in the LGBTQI, right? You bring the transgender, you bring gender non-conforming individuals, right? Gender non-binary individuals. And this is the reality that we find ourselves in the world today, that people don't want to be defined as women at all, but they act as women, but they don't want to be referred to as women. That cannot be the one that determines their identity only, right? So intersectionality is very important. Intersectionality taking into account the experiences of rural women, taking the experiences of farm workers in the Western Cape. It's all of that is inclusive and all embracing. Let's move on. Okay, we've dealt with accountability, and just to drive the point home, it's if you look at government, how it's structured, Department of Social Development has got a budget for gender-based violence. Justice has got a budget for gender-based violence. Department of Health has got a budget for gender-based violence. The police have got a budget for gender-based violence. And all of that is uncoordinated. At any given time, Department of Women is doing something, Department of Social Development is doing something. So there was no coordination, there's no accountability. What this NSP is doing is to force accountability, coordination, and there must be leadership. And that's where the structure comes into being, that there's going to be a council made up of civil society and government that is going to oversee the implementation of this NSP, right? That council, there will be a nomination process that will be announced by the Department of Women, and people are more than welcome to nominate whoever they wish to nominate. The criteria has been set out, and we need that body to be the one that drives this implementation. The implementation is going to happen at every government department, at every sphere of government. Is going to happen in the private sector, is going to happen in the churches, religious bodies, is going to happen with traditional leaders, is going to happen in at the schools, whether at primary level or at tertiary or at high school level. Every single entry point in this country will be expected to drive the NSP, and the council is responsible to ensure that it's implemented accordingly, right? So that's where accountability and coordination and leadership comes in. We've got a structure to get us to that point. The entire NSP is budgeted at 8 billion for the 5 years, for 5-year period, right? And that money must be made available, right? The biggest driver of this NSP is prevention and healing. How do we stop intimate partner violence? The biggest one in the country, right? How do we stop sexual harassment in the workplace? How do we stop economic abuse of women? How do we stop emotional abuse of women? How do we stop cyber violence? Right? So prevention is the big one. And what are the interventions that have been identified to ensure that we stop and prevent GBV, right? So we stop it from happening. And that's the ideal that we want to achieve, that we want to stop it before it happens, right? And here it's about understanding the systemic and structural drivers of GBV. If we all understand them, and you will see them throughout the document, we have identified them, right? We have identified drug abuse, alcohol abuse. We've identified patriarchy, the entire patriarchal system. We've identified and the institutions that support all of that. We have identified all of that. We have to intervene in all of that. How do you stop the abuse of alcohol, which exacerbates? It does not cause the violence. It exacerbates the violence, right? So I'll give you an example. In the Northern Cape has got the highest alcohol abuse, right? And it's got highest number of rapes. And one of the things that we picked up and we put forward to government was, if you look at the many taverns and shebeens that are in many areas throughout our country, you'll find that most of them don't have the necessary permits to operate, but they're operating, right? That tells you that they are already operating without being given the permission to do so. So why are they not being closed down, right? And we made the point to government that in where you find that a tavern or a shebeen is operating without the requisite license, shut it down. Because it doesn't make sense that in one street in an area, you have 3 taverns. So how were they given the license to operate when in fact one of the conditions for anyone to operate that license is to get approval from the community that they agree that this tavern or shebeen must operate from here, right? So that's prevention is a big one, and it's going to take the largest chunk of the budget, because you need to make sure that you are out there communicating different messages to different groups, right? When you're talking to children at primary school, what kind of messaging are you communicating? At tertiary level, at the churches, at the workplace. So it's huge, and it requires lots of money to do so. There were programs that were identified that could assist in the prevention. Those of you know Stepping Stone, you know that they work around issues of sexual health and parenting, because you've got many young kids who are parents at the age of 16 or 17. They don't know how to parent, but they're expected to parent, right? We'll talk to you in detail about that particular program that we're working on. But so many interventions from different service providers will be used to make sure that they intervene accordingly. Move on. Law and policy, very clear. What are the existing laws and policies that can assist us in, one, making sure that we have effective law enforcement wins. For instance, we have at the moment we have policing that is inadequate, that is inept, but also that is in itself not understanding what GBV is all about, right? So if you go to the police today to report a rape, you'll be you might get angry. I mean, we have gone through this many times. when the police themselves, whether you report a rape or you report a domestic violence matter, most times they say to you, just go home and sort it out with your partner. And that has happened to many women where they're told, just go home and sort it out. And what happens that the woman tomorrow is killed, do not get any assistance, right? And we had to intervene in some of these cases just to make sure that they get the minimum service from the police, right? So if we have an ineffective criminal justice system from the police to the courts, it's not going to serve as a deterrent. The impunity will continue, right? Where when you go to court, the prosecutor is not well prepared for a case at all, right? They issue a bail, they give a perpetrator bail, even though the person has not even given them their address where they can find the individual if they are released. We had to intervene in cases such as those, where we had to fight for bail not to be issued for a murder case of Naledi Lishoro in the Free State. We'll talk to you about that case. So unless you have this criminal justice system being efficient and effective, you're going to have this impunity still, because people think that nothing will happen to them because the law is just an S. Nothing is happening, right? Then you have response and care and support. And response and care really is the well-being of the survivor of violence, right? To make sure that they get psychotherapy. If you want to leave, you want to go to a shelter, that there is a shelter available, right? And this is where you find majority of NGOs in this country. They play in this space, right? Just to make sure that the services are available to survivors and victims of violence. It takes a lot of money, and most of these NGOs stepped in to assist DSD because DSD do not have the capacity to deal with it. So you find that most of them do this work on behalf of DSD, and they get funded by DSD. Move on. And then economic power. We need to make the link. You would have heard it most of the time that most women would rather stay in abusive relationships because they cannot fend for themselves, right? They are wholly dependent on their partners. So if they were to leave, what will happen to them and their children, right? So we have to make sure that they're gainfully, they contribute, they play in the economic space, and they can be independent enough to walk away if the need arises, right? And so we must create opportunities to ensure that women can be economically independent and can make decisions for themselves and their children, and can take the decision once they find that the relationship is unbearable, they can walk away because they can afford to look after themselves. Okay. Now, this is one area that when every time the police issue, the police minister comes before the nation and tells us that the crime stats are as follows, and we say to him, give us disaggregated data on violence against women. Tell us how many rapes do we have, how many femicide cases, how many sexual assault cases, and they cannot, right? So we are now with this in the NSP. There's a huge drive to gather data and build an information system that is reliable, that is credible, that can be used as a base to talk about when we say 1 out of 5 women are raped, right? Is it a fact, or we just saying it because it's been said everywhere in the media? So we want to build a credible information system so that our stats are reliable, and then we can design appropriate interventions because the stats are reliable. Okay. Okay, I think that's about it on the NSP, and we can talk to yourselves on the different examples that I touched on, and I want to go quick.
Brenda?
Hello.
Please, may I ask a question now that you've finished that section? Thank you so much.
All right.
There
Okay.
was the part which I know it must be addressed somewhere, but it was not clear. Is you painted very adequately how women, gender-based violence, and women and young girls, and people that you said maybe are not, are not binarily identifiable as to which gender, but still obviously they experience violence. The nexus which I still don't understand is why children get so abused and killed and beaten and raped, whether they're girl children or boy children. What is the psychology where there's such a nexus between our society having high levels of gender-based violence and high levels of hurting children?
Okay. Onica, I'm going to give it to you and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, sure, certainly. I think, so the NSP does touch a little bit on children, but there was a concerted effort to really focus the NSP on women specifically, and I'll tell you why. Part of if you look at the more recent cases that we've had where children are actually murdered, it's usually connected to conflict between the two parents, the mother and the father. And so children are sort of used as a way to punish the women in these relationships.
Right.
So abusing the child or killing the child as a way to getting back at the mother. But one of the things as a society that we really need to begin to deal with is this notion that children only belong to mothers, right? We talk about women and children as if women make the babies by themselves.
Yes.
We have completely allowed men to be abdicated from the responsibility of caring for these children and being perceived as primary caretakers. And this is where the prevention pillar is going to really come into play with programs on parenting, and also just ending the impunity on men who don't support their children. You know, there's a very close relationship between femicide cases and maintenance disputes.
Yes.
And so it's really important for us when we look, and all of that also contributes to this economic disempowerment of women, because we've allowed, a society where men don't have to take responsibility. They don't have to be accountable. The state steps in and tries to make the woman whole in some kind of way, but still we have not done anything to make sure that the men are held accountable and responsible for the children that also belong to them.
Right. Thank you.
Brenda?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Zandi.
Hi, Zandi.
Hi. As a woman in technology, we've also looked at technology facilitated gender-based violence. Mm-hmm. And we found that, women are harassed by people they don't even know, not their spouses. They're harassed, they're threatened, they're intimidated, and they're, eventually killed. So I think that's one area that we should also look at as this group, to say, what is it that we're going to do, with regards to, technology enhancing, these harmful gender norms that we're talking about.
No, very true, Zadida. I mean, Onica is working in that area, cyber violence, and she can talk in detail on that. But I mean, it's something that is on the radar at the moment, because we can see it. I mean, we've got 2 cases of young women who were bullied on Facebook, and it's men exposing. And if you looked at the Malaika Mahlatsi one, really a man deciding to talk about the relationship and exposing what the two parties were doing as lovers, and in that way trying to silence her. And that's a form of violence that we're beginning to see, where men use social media to silence women.
Sexual harassment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if we can just pack that technology facilitated gender-based violence.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. And just to go to take it further with what Onica was saying, I don't know how many of you saw the study a year ago on the two provinces, actually, Limpopo and Northwest, where young girls who were in high school were pregnant. They were in their thousands in Northwest and Limpopo. Pregnant, they were impregnated, and they have got children. So we then took up this matter and we went to the Northwest to meet with these young girls. All of them were raped. So let's call it for what it is, because when these men they claimed to have sex with the men, they were raped because they were under 16, right? They've got these children who must be looked after by either a parent, because they are still at school. Now, when you asked all of them where these men are, right? And you will see most of these men are older, by the way. It's not another 17-year-old or 18-year-old. You find a 30-year-old who has done that, who has just been left alone and not bothered that there is a child that must be taken care of, right? And this is what Onica is talking about, that the burden is then left with this young girl. She's 17 now, right? But she's got a child to look after. She then relies on a child grant, right? The state steps in, 350. The systems in government are not talking to each other to find out if the father is working and is able to at least afford the maintenance of this child. So it's crazy what's going on, and it's many young women who have found themselves in this situation where the hope of even finishing school, they're not even driven. I mean, when we met with them, it was heart-wrenching, because you found young girls who had no hope of anything, right? They are in high school. They could not even string a sentence just to say something about themselves and have the confidence to speak about themselves. They're broken, and so we have to find ways of building them and molding them to have the voice and speak up for themselves and identify their dreams and passions, so that they can be citizens that are productive. But that's what we are confronted with in this country.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add on that, Brenda, the average age of the fathers was actually 29, which means that most of them are much older than 29, right?
Yeah.
Also, what we found with this is that we have to begin to change the language in terms of how we speak about these issues. To continue to call it a teenage pregnancy crisis is actually a missed opportunity for us to address the real issue. These are statutory rape cases. And interestingly, it's happening not just in South Africa. Uganda and Kenya, coming out of the COVID-19 lockdown, has now reported huge numbers of young girls who are pregnant. And it is said, based on the media reports, that, well, the media still uses the term they were defiled by their relatives during lockdown. And I think that we need to just all, as professionals, as people in media, begin to really change the language around this and actually call it what it is. It is rape. We met with young girls who were pregnant at age 12 or giving birth at age 13. So some of them as young as 11. And so that cannot be defilement. It is rape, and it cannot be a teenage pregnancy crisis. It's a rape crisis.
Brenda?
Yeah.
Question. Two questions, actually. One was, you scared me with the example that you gave on the protection order that is not applicable across province. That is completely ridiculous. So I was, and it's actually more sad than ridiculous. And I was wondering, how do we use technology to make this possible, that protection order can be effective from one province to the other, because clearly the system is not working. Then the second is around budgets. You spoke about how small the budget in the Department of Women is. And I wondered, how do we bring this language into business, where we make it part of the license to operate in business, because we are easily more than 50% of the workers, to say, how do we get a slice of not just CSI, but allocated budget for gender-based violence, because it happens in the workplace as well.
Yeah.
So those are my two.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yvonne. So the first one is, we raised this thing, that there were 3 bills that were being processed by the Department of Justice. The Domestic Violence Act, there were amendments to that, and it dealt with the protection order. And the Deputy Minister of Justice was spearheading these amendments. And in that meeting, we spoke about automation and really trying to, I mean, we are talking about 4IR, right? So we should be able to document and put these things in a system that can work and across provinces, right? And they agreed. I mean, I think government is looking at resources and trying to find how they can do that, because those amendments are actually coming before Parliament in a week's time, right? So hopefully what they're going to present as justice is that they are looking at automation of protection orders, for instance, right? And also what we had proposed with the protection orders was that at the moment, is the woman who must leave the home, right, and find a shelter, right? And in other jurisdictions, you find that the police, once they are called to a domestic dispute and they get to the house and they find that indeed there is a domestic dispute and the woman was violated, they have the power to issue a safety protection order immediately on the spot and remove the man from there, right? So the woman is left at home, the man must go and find a shelter somewhere, right? And it's an interim order with a return date of either within 7 days or 14 days, right? And that's what we have pushed for. Hopefully, when these amendments come before Parliament in a week or two, the discussions will ensue and we will engage. But the automation, Yvonne, we have asked for it, and it's up to government to see the value in doing that, because it is an issue. I mean, during lockdown, we had challenges with protection orders. Understand that the regulations were clear that protection orders you can apply for a protection order because it's an emergency, right? We dealt with those cases. The courts were not willing to hear protection order cases.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a reality.
Sure.
Right? So that's what we went through during this lockdown, right? And it was about every magistrate, every court interpreting the regulations the way they wanted to interpret them. Right?
Yeah. So also on protection orders, it's not just an automation issue, it's also a digitization issue. Because right now what happens, and that needs to happen in the interim while they're developing the automation. Because what happens right now is that you are given a piece of paper, and if the abuser comes into your contact and you call the police, if you don't have that actual piece of paper, they don't act at all. Yeah. So that piece of paper can get lost, it can get water spilled on it. I mean, anything can happen to a piece of paper. But the fact that, even police from the very same jurisdiction that issued the protection order are not able within their own system to pull up that record, and act based on, you know, what they've verified is really troubling. So I think more urgently it is the digitization, so that women also don't have the burden of carrying this paper while also worrying about running away to a place of safety.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
carry on. Sorry. Let's
Yvonne, yeah, just for you to understand. So I think it's all of us to know how a protection order is applied for in this country. You won't want to go through that, right? So firstly, I must go to a magistrate court, right? And they've got a domestic. So depending on a court, whether it's got a domestic violence section, I will go there and meet up with the clerk, and the clerk records what I'm there for, and I must wait for the magistrate, so the magistrate can hear what I have to say. They can issue me with an interim protection order, right? You are then given that piece of paper that you must then go to the police station for the police to serve it on the perpetrator. That's the reality of women in this country. You run around to enforce justice, right? Okay.
So my question was slightly, so what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing from you is just how fundamentally complex this issue of gender-based violence is in our country. And, you know, we have, I think one of the things I would like to take away today is how each of our skills can be used to contribute to trying to eradicate gender-based violence. So for instance, I listened to Zandi's question. There was also someone else who talked about technology. How can Zandi be an efficient champion using her technology platform? How can Sonia be a champion using her financial stroke legal platform? You know, for me, that's what I hope to get out of this, because just the limited amount I've heard you talk, the limited amount of time that I've heard you speak, it is a crisis, and we have to start somewhere.
Definitely.
You know, I already think that it's extremely positive that you have people from an LSM such as ours being willing to engage, because what I've also seen is that our women in the lower LSMs who are not more affected, but who are powerless relative to us, don't have the support, whereas we are able to do much more than sit and talk about how terrible the situation is.
Yeah, very true. And I think it's something that we will end with and decide how we all make a contribution, you know, in the best way possible. And I'm grateful for that, because part of the reason why we have this is actually to ensure that all of us participate, right? And we can participate at different points of this crisis. And in fact, we're no longer calling it a crisis, Pulani, we are calling it a pandemic now, right? Because it's happening every day, and we are becoming numb, and we don't want to get to a point where we just become numb and just say it's part of who we are. That's not who we are, right? And we want to change that. So yes, I think we can spend a few minutes around how you can be of value, and I think maybe based on the discussions, it's individuals themselves indicating their strong talent or skill or expertise, and we can then direct it, because we know who and where the need is, and how you can assist in that particular area.
Okay, Brenda, it's Zandi. I'm going to have to leave the call, but I will gladly participate in the technology stream.
Okay.
Yes. So I will just touch base with you and Pulani maybe afterwards, just to check how the meeting went.
I think you can. Yeah, I'm going to bring Onica in there, because Onica is the one with that stream, the ICT one.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah. So I'll
okay.
get like
Thanks,
to
thanks,
that one. Okay, guys.
Thanks.
Take
Okay. All right. Where were we?
Sorry, can I just say something? It's level.
Yes, Mama Petra.
I want to find out, just in you know, all that we're talking about is very aspirational. It's very medium to long term. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what is it that can be done in the short term. I mean, I'm always telling Pulani that every time I get into an elevator, I must check who's there. If it's a man, and
no, true.
So, you know, gender-based violence for me is, it firstly is psychological before it is anything else for all of us as women in this country. And so in the very short term, before we do all that consideration, can't we implement some sort of self-defense lessons for women?
So it's I mean, that is, you know, there are many women who are doing it. But I mean, we keep on asking the question, why is the burden placed on women all the time, right?
Because they're the ones who are being attacked.
So we need to change the languaging, because we need to be teaching men and young boys certain things. Stop abusing women. Stop thinking that you own and can control a woman, right? Because unless we do those kinds of things,
that's medium term. The crisis is now. I'm saying, how do I make sure I can get into a lift comfortably today? Either go for gun shooting lessons, or it's that drastic a problem.
No, listen, I think that is happening. There are many women who are now doing self-defense classes. There are women who are taking, you know, they're making sure that they're going to the shooting range and are willing to buy a gun. So that is being done, and I think it can be done depending on you as an individual. What is it that you want to do for yourself, right? So we're looking at an individual level, and this is what I said earlier. It's both at the individual and at the collective level, right?
Okay.
Let me just throw in a caution here, especially since we are talking about self-defense. And trust me, Lebo, I'm there too. I think I'm getting gun lessons after being anti-gun for so many years. I think that's where I am. But I just want to, you know, we're dealing with a serious issue. So I just want to give a caution that a lot of the research that we've seen, in instances where women actually physically fight back, it increases the rate of them actually being killed.
Yeah.
So we can talk lightly about we're going to beat these men up, we're going to fem up, we're going to, you know, but I think the responsible thing also is for us to consciously know that when we've had cases where women actually physically fight back, they almost often get killed. And therefore, the medium and long-term strategy is just as important as, you know, the short-term one. And the short-term one needs to be not just staying at home. I mean, we need to be able to enjoy our constitutional right to safety and be able to get out of our homes and you know, without fear.
Okay, no, thank you. I hear that, but you know, part of this conversation, I'm saying, you know, women who can afford are doing these short-term interventions that we're talking about. But what about the women who cannot afford? The other point is this, that women are getting killed anyway. You know, I'd rather take my chances and be killed defending myself than just be a sitting duck in the very short term. I keep referring to the fact that, you know, everything we're addressing here today, it's to me seems very medium term, very long term. But if my very movements, what time do I leave my office? You know, I need to get a guard. Do I even trust that guard? You know, do I trust the security company? It's a whole convoluted thing. So what do we do in short term?
So, you know, as I said, Lewi, nothing stops an individual from doing that, right? So, and I'll use an example. Many young women decided to do so last year by naming and shaming their violators, right?
Mm-hmm.
On social media. So 9,000 names were put up.
Okay.
We then had to act on behalf of not even 20 men who took these matters up. What was interesting was the swiftness and the effectiveness of the police in tracing the women.
Yeah.
In a day, they were able to find these young women. When on a daily basis, when you say, go and find a man who has beaten his wife, they can't find. in this case, in these cases, the 10 that we had, they were able to find these women in no time, right? These men were able to take these young women to court, claiming damages of 800,000, 500,000, and all of that, right? So the pushback from men is huge, and you have seen it on social media. What happens when there's a case of rape or even of murder of a woman? It happened with Tsegofatso, right? And I want to talk about that, right? It happened with Tsegofatso. And if you were on Twitter, you would have seen what was coming, right? Many women were on the timelines talking about that this thing has to stop. And it took one tweet from someone who said the woman is to blame. She bought the killers. And the men leapt on that, and it's their savior, because they believe that it's not the man who killed Tsegofatso, it's the woman. Right? So, and this is what we battle with on a daily basis, because the men think that there's a war against them, right?
They do, yeah.
Yeah. And we have seen the microaggression that is coming out. There's microaggression, but also there is literally scary stuff that is coming from them, that they're willing even to kill, right? Because they're being questioned on their conduct and behavior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it requires, what I've seen is that most men now are saying they are going to step up and speak about these issues. So they need to do that for themselves, right? And ask themselves the questions why this aggression, this masculinity that has to be portrayed for everyone to see that they are men, and their manhood is defined by how many women they can rape or kill. They need to talk to themselves and find answers for themselves. We have said we are tired of we have spoken enough. We have protested enough. We have a plan on how this must be addressed, and we are going to focus in doing that work.
Okay.
Yeah. Any comments? Anything? And by the way, let me deal with this Tsegofatso one, because you see, that's not what is in the court, right? So I would urge all of you, and I want you to be cautious, is to wait for once the trial starts, to hear the evidence, right? Because what everyone is trying to do is to pit women and men against each other, and claim that we are now quiet because a woman is involved. Our position is quite clear. There's no woman who's involved in the killing of Tsegofatso. There's none. There is a suspect who has been arrested. He has given a statement. His statement did not say that the wife or the fiance paid him 70,000 to kill Tsegofatso. Nothing like that. And I will await a proper trial where he has to give his testimony. Okay. I think, Onica, we can touch on the harass map so that everyone know exactly the harass map that we have, that we're working on.
Okay, yes, I've just unmuted myself, and I'll try to quickly share my screen. I'm not sure if I'm sharing. I'm not yet.
Yeah, you've got me there.
Okay. Yeah, this screen sharing thing is a bit temperamental today. But anyway, we have a website. I'm gonna send it to each of you. It's called harassmap.wise, the number 4 Africa with a K.org, and I'll write it out for you. And what harassmap is beginning to allow us to not wait for crime stats or even government to do this, but it's really allowing us to begin to map the hotspots in terms of where the cases of harassment of women are taking place. And so if you go on the site, you can actually also access it through your mobile phone. You are able to go, and we're going to go to Cape Town just now. I'm on the map for those of you who are able to follow me. I'm on the map, and we're going to go to Cape Town because there's red dots in Cape Town right now. And we're going to try and read and see what's going on there. And basically what this does is that it's a system that's allowing women throughout the country to begin to map the incidences, locations, and times where they are harassed. So this is a woman who mapped her harassment at DG Outbound. And I'm sure if you've been following the news, you know that DG Outbound is the company that is facing such a huge sexual harassment claim because this woman, her name is Lisa, came out to report this case and actually posted it on Harassmap prior to her filing the case. And she then inspired more women to come out and share similar incidents. And basically it's a really simple system where you go into the map and you say, I want to report an incident, and you can use it to detail what happened to you and where. It doesn't report it directly to the police. It's just a mapping exercise for you to be able to report an incident anonymously. And how this is helping is, you may have heard like recently that now the 20-year waiting period for opening a case on rape has been removed, so you can report a rape case anytime. What we find with a lot of rape victims especially is that they are not always ready immediately to open a case. But by the time that they've received some psychotherapy interventions and they feel strong enough to open a case, they have not done a good job of actually detailing the information that would then make for a case that is prosecutable. So it sort of makes this no deadline for filing a decoration, basically, because if you don't have the kind of report that you've put together to be able to have a prosecutable case, then nothing is going to happen of that. So with Harassmap, women are able to, sort of reference what they've posted on Harassmap to say, on this day, I reported that this happened to me, and they can be as detailed as they want to be without necessarily exposing their name. They give the full address of the location and the time. In terms of just for us in collecting some of this data, it's beginning to paint a picture. So for example, a woman gets grabbed at a taxi rank. If more women are reporting similar incidences at that taxi rank during a particular period of the day, then we begin to see the prevalence, similar to how for road information, we are able to know high accident streets where there's a high accident zone. So we are able to now begin to do that with harassment. And this covers not just rape alone, but rape, sexual harassment, catcalling is also a problem. So we need to be able to map and know, this is a hotspot for, if you're a woman, you're going to be passing through here. This is where women are mostly harassed. But apart from that, it will also hopefully help us to begin to make a case for allocation of resources to specific areas based on the prevalence of some of these incidents. Because right now, we are all just kind of combing through the crime stats that are not disaggregated, but are just really not helpful in terms of us knowing exactly where the problematic areas are, and whether there's particular times of the day where it's more problematic for women in terms of them getting harassed or not. So I'll send the links, and we've got a short video that we've done. It also allows you to record if there was an intervention. So meaning that if someone actually intervened and made sure that they either told the people to stop what they were doing or what have you, then you are able to report that as well. So we can also begin to see community action against some of these incidents, which is really important, because we are, if we want a society that is free of and intolerant of violence, it's going to take more than police. It also has to take the bystanders and everyone in society to really step in and participate.
Yeah.
Colleagues?
Yeah.
I'm also going to be dropping off now.
We are going to leave. We are finishing off now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Extending big thanks to you, Brenda and Onica. The commitment and the dedication, it's come through in your presentations. We really appreciate this forum. And Pulani made absolutely the right point that we need action steps and a harvesting of the skills available to us, and please count me in as well. Pulani, that was absolutely the right thing to say. What next and what can we do? Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And I think quickly, Sonia, before disappear, we're working on sexual harassment cases in the workplace. So if you are aware of any sexual harassment case anywhere in corporate or wherever, we're taking up those cases because there's a lot of them, and many professionals are working in silence, but they are subjected to extreme violations, sexual violations in the workplace. So please refer them to us, and we can also come in and do some workshops with any of the companies around sexual harassment.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I think in closing, what I'm going to put Mapulani on the spot, and because I know all of you and I know what you are capable of, right? And I know that I can rely on most of you. But I think it will be good for me to know what each and every one of you is willing to do, and where you think you can be of great value. And if you could do that and send it to me via WhatsApp, then myself and Onica will then communicate with you directly and see how we can utilize your skills in the work that we do. Is that okay?
That is fine, Brenda.
Okay. All right. Anyone else wants to raise anything before we close? You fine? There's a protest tomorrow at the police, I think. And please watch out for it, because what the women are saying who will be protesting is that they want answers from the police. And I mean, the police have been, and I think they're aware that they're under siege and they're under the microscope, so they need to up their game. But we need to continue to put the pressure so that they act. Otherwise, the laissez-faire attitude continues. We continue to put pressure for them to act. So if you have people that you've got cases that are not moving, send them to us. We are able to escalate them.
Brenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was my problem. I've been around this space for
Zanele, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you are faint, but yes, we can.
Yes, I was saying I've been around this space. And
we can't hear you, Zanele.
I'm saying that having been around gender-based violence for quite some time,
yeah,
I find that the point of call, because when women experience gender-based violence, the first place they go to is the police station, only to find illiterate police who are taking statements, illiterate police who are taking statements, who are meant to follow up these cases. And inevitably, it doesn't go well. And that we have a culture of no consequences in this country in general.
Yeah.
So I get very, very perplexed, because the women still have to deal with those people who can't even take a statement, who can't even
collate evidence to be able to assist these women in the future. So I would be interested in a strategy that focuses on on equipping the first point of call for these women to be able to get the statements, store them, and be able to be of assistance in the future.
Okay.
But as for what I can do, I'll SMS to you later.
Okay, now that's fine. That is very valid, and that's part of the work that we are doing currently, just to make sure that we give that support to the women. Yeah. So thanks for that, Zanele. So if there's anything that you think you can contribute, just hit me on WhatsApp, and then we will then have a conversation and see how best to use your talents and skills. All right.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for this. I mean, I think we can have many of these things with other people. So if you know others who wish to know more and just engage, we are willing to do so. And that's how we popularize this NSP.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Have a good night.